Today is September 12th, 2023. Today is a day like no other. It is a day where today is different than yesterday, and it is different than tomorrow, and it is different than last year. It's different than last week. It's different than last month. You guessed it. It's also different than last decade. Because today I have formulated something that I could not have formulated a decade ago, a year ago, a month ago, or a week ago, or even yesterday. Indeed, knowledge has been accrued for me to say something like this, and which is different than what I used to say. So the reality is that an ideal trade is fathomable. Achieving that ideal trade is another story. So, I look upon this opportunity to explore this SMB Capital guy, Mike Bellafiore, wrote a book called One Good Trade. I can see now why he wrote the One Good Trade. He wrote it because it is very significant, because all trades are based on that single trade. The processes that are required to make that trade is essentially the same as any other trades that follows henceforth. Okay? So what is an ideal trade? What is an ideal trade? An ideal trade at this point is going to change tomorrow and maybe a year from now, and I may still not be profitable. But I thank the good Lord that I will have this opportunity that He gives me to reflect upon and receive and be able to be in the position, breathing above ground, out of His grace, out of His generosity towards me. So right now, what is an ideal trade? And I haven't really thought about this in the past because I had no idea what's going on, right? What is going on with trading? What is it? So initially, I buy and sell, and hopefully the net is a positive. Okay, that's the ideal. That's the idea of trading. However, there's some more complex things that are involved, which is when I buy something, okay, I have to have an idea that is going to go in the direction that I choose it to go. Because I'm thinking to myself, oh, it looks like it's going to go this way. But the ideal trades and I have to give respect to SMB Capital because they specifically outline the criteria that define the direction of the stock. They clearly substantiate the criteria that are required to specify and generate the thesis that contains the direction based on that particular set of criteria. So ideal criteria, ideal trade, and they also have this thing called like take the trade, and then which is a 10, and on the other spectrum, which is a 1, which is avoid it like the plague or something like that, right? And so now I can see how they do that. It's fascinating. I saw one of their episodes. It took me a long time. It just took me a long time to really figure out what they're talking about. I have no idea what, because way back, like about a year or two ago, I've been watching their videos and man, it just didn't make any sense. What the heck are these guys talking about, right? And and I finally realized there's an ideal way to trade. So, what is an ideal way to trade for me? Ideal way for me to trade is me recognizing a specific pattern that I've observed that will behave in an extrapolated fashion to behave at a certain point where this particular setup will result in a predictable outcome. Okay? Once I identify that precise setup, then I extrapolate to see where it's going to be on a statistical probability, and should my conclusion be slightly off based on the overwhelming worldwide global stimulation that are applied that could deviate or become a outlier situation, then I need to place a certain and definitive stop loss in order to protect me from imploding. So essentially, there is a thing called a bandwidth. There is essentially a bandwidth kind of thing. So in electrical engineering terminology, and I got a C average in college too, but I did work as an engineer for many years. And so in engineering terminology, there's a thing called the bandwidth. There is a uh, there is a there is a frequency band. There is a frequency band that will only allow a window of frequency through this particular entry. Okay? That means that bell curve distribution of this frequency that are passing through will behave in a statistical probability manner in which I open up that window to only allow a certain probability to enter. If I were to make it too tight, then the probability will be stopped out and I will have to exit from that trade, and that trade is nullified. I cannot take that trade, right? And so once I have established a specific entry bandwidth based on the stop loss specifies specifically the bandwidth of the entry into a trade. I enter, set a stop loss, then I allow it to move. And if the waveform is that for that particular day, for that particular universe, that particular time frame, for that particular stock, okay, for that particular stock, it's going to have a specific waveform that will enter into the trade. And if it's another stock, it's going to behave slightly different. And I have to place that stop loss so that it creates a window that allows the opportunity to progress towards the projected outcome. Okay? The anticipation of that particular setup that I recognize is going to evolve into a projection. That projection is going to be set based on it will be set based on the limit that I specify. So these are the two criteria that I set, and I enter and I select which stock it's going to be. Then I allow the trade to just run. Okay, that is the ideal trade. And at the end of the trade, it'll either stop out or it'll hit the projection. It is based on the statistical probability of the open window that I create with the stop loss and the limit that I specify to sell the stock. Those are the two criteria that define how well my trade will be done. Ideally speaking, the stop loss will be the smallest incremental value below the purchase price. Then ideally speaking, I will hit precisely the uh, I will hit precisely the apex of that particular waveform for that particular stock, and then I will exit the trade at that moment. So essentially, essentially what I would do is I would hit the low point of the day, and then lowest point of the day, and then the stock will be moving and will not retrace, so that my stop loss will never be hit. And then once it reaches the apex, I've set the limit, which is synchronized to the apex or the height of the highest point, the high of the day or the low of the day, based on the way that I traded. And once it hits that, then I exit the trade and the stock retraces. That is an ideal trade. That's what I need to do. So that means what are the known criteria that I need? One of the things that I need is to have a known setup. A known setup that has slight variations that I could look into and projecting it into other stocks to see if it fits into the setup encyclopedia that I have in my mind. And once in my mind, then I take whatever I see and then compare it with what is being displayed with me at that time. And then, if it matches with a pattern recognition, it's like there is a company called there are companies called that processes semiconductor wafers. Okay, they process semiconductor wafers. These are wafers that are made of silicon, and on top of that silicon is a metal layer and insulator layers and semiconductor materials, all infused to create a circuitry. And when that circuitry is essentially created on top of that silicon layer, there is a known repeatable pattern that occurs, because nowadays there's 12-inch wafers, right? There's 12-inch wafers. Maybe they have 16-inch wafers now, but when I was an engineer, which was a long time ago, they had like 12-inch wafers. These 12-inch wafers would have thousands and thousands of devices on it, and these thousands and thousands of devices, looking at on a visually, have repeatable patterns that I can use. And when these wafers are placed onto something called a prober, it has the flatness and the planarity that allows it to be aligned correctly. And what that happens is that it goes from one edge of the wafer to the other edge of the wafer and aligns it. And then it goes on to the other side to make sure that the X, Y, and Z is all set up. Once that occurs, then the electrical components of million-dollar equipment can be manipulated over this wafer of each device to see and verify whether these devices are functional or not. Once that functionality is determined, right? Because the reality is, if all the wafer is bad, then throw the wafer. You don't want to spend money packaging things, right? And so that is what's called a pattern recognition thing. And each device has the specifically, not precisely the same, but they are essentially very much the same. Atomically speaking, there will be slight adjustment differences in the weight and the placement of atoms, right? Visually speaking, they're very, very close from one to the other, from one side to the other side, to the top, to the bottom, to the left, and the right side. That means what I will be doing is essentially mimicking what that machine does throughout the day, looking into the stock to see what's happening. And so how do I prepare myself? Now I need to prepare myself to understand what I need to do in order to prepare myself to perform the duties that are required in order for me to be consistently profitable. So what do I do that? The people who are swing traders, they look at certain things and they make the trade and they go away for until the next day or next week or whatever they want to do, because that's how they trade. But for somebody like me who is trading within intraday, I have to look at it and process it each and every day. Okay? And so what I'm looking for essentially is a setup, okay? And I have to clearly substantiate that particular setup, and hopefully it is seen every day, okay? And pretty much in a very, very effective manner. Once that happens, then I will be able to make the right trades and make this ideal trade come to a reality.